This is a book I feel that many Christians should get and read, especially Southern Baptists. I'll talk about why later. And they should read it with the right motives and with an eagerness to be faithful to God and His Word in their life and church. Hey guys, Joe here, back to the Word with a critical and compassionate review of Megan Basham's Shepherds for Sale: How Evangelical Leaders Traded the Truth for a Leftist Agenda. I got this book right after it released, been working through it, and I'm ready to share my thoughts about it. I've done some other videos on my channel, introduction and conclusion overview, and I'm going to do a chapter by chapter kind of summary of these agendas that will come out soon. But what are we going to cover in this video, as I'm abandoning my normal kind of review format to do a little more in-depth review? So in this video, I'm going to cover disclaimers, a personal and book author, aim, and audience. And then we're going to hop into my first impressions when I got the book, some of the things I liked, some of the things I would have changed / disliked. And then I'm going to get into the review segment, the bad, some of the negative things, some of the good, the positive things that I personally felt as I was reading through it. And then also the ugly / the cautionary things for those who pick up this book and desire to read it. And then I'll go through further resources, kind of interviews that others had done with Basham and others around this book that helped me learn about it as I was reading the book as well. The bottom line, I just want to say up front, is that this is a book I feel that many Christians should get and read, especially Southern Baptists. I'll talk about why later. And they should read it with the right motives and with an eagerness to be faithful to God and His Word in their life and church. I'll unpack that after my review segment, but that's my bottom line up front right there. So, hopping into the disclaimers, I think it's important you understand who wrote this and why she did so, and also my background as I'm commenting and talking on this book. So first up, I grew up in a Bible-believing, non-denominational church in West Virginia, preached the Bible as it is, for people as they are, plurality of elders, Baptistic in our confessions and beliefs, and doctrinal statement as a church, but non-denominational as a whole. In 2013, I moved to Ohio, went to school at Cedarville University, and joined a Southern Baptist church, and I've been Southern Baptist confessionally ever since. I'm now a staff member at a Southern Baptist church doing media as well as leading the college and young adult ministry, and during that time, I graduated with my Master's of Divinity from Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary. Hopping into the author, Megan Basham is also a Southern Baptist, attends church and is in journalism and works currently for the Daily Wire, but has a history in journalism of working for other evangelical or Christian publishing journalism places. And so she deals massively in this book with Southern Baptists, not only because they're a huge target for the left, but because she is a Southern Baptist as well. Southern Baptists are 5% or something. It's ridiculous of American population, the largest Protestant denomination. So it makes a lot of sense that the left, Democrats, those with leftist ideologies would target Southern Baptists in particular. This book is not just for Southern Baptists, it's for any American church goer, attender, but they feature a lot in here, which is why I particularly wanted to pay attention to it and read it. Her audience, beyond just Southern Baptists, those in leadership and those in the pews, is any church member in the pew. This book, as I cover in my video in the introduction and conclusion overview, is written for church members in the pew who have seen the left drift of their church. Their pastor is no longer calling out sin for what it is. He's making moral issues, political issues, moral issues, introducing curriculum to the church that push leftist ideologies, woke things, liberal drift. They're seeing it and they're scratching their head and they're going, is this really happening in my church? It's not pockets in cities. It's not different states. It's all across the United States. And she's trying to connect all the dots for Christian lay people in the pew and church leaders and sound the alarm so that we update our antivirus and we contend for the faith and fight for biblical Christianity in the public sphere. That's really what this book is all about, and its aim and its audience. And so you need to know that going in as a disclaimer for what this book is all about. So let's get into my first impressions. So first up, endnotes, endnotes, endnotes. There are 52 pages of them. One of the big claims of this book before it came out is that she was going to connect the dots, show who was for sale, and bring the receipts to prove the data. And she has 52 pages of endnotes. I'm thankful for the work she did on that. I wish they were footnotes. Honestly, if you're going to read through this book, you're going to check the endnotes for maybe, unless you're some weird individual probably. Most of us are just going to check some of the facts that we find outrageous or kind of really crazy or like, wow, I didn't know about that. And then we're just going to keep reading. We're going to see the note and we're not going to check it. I love to have that running commentary at the bottom for footnotes. So I wish they did footnotes, but she does have the receipts. You can check the sources. She only published in here as sources things that were public or said on the record. And so I'm thankful that she did that. I wish they were footnotes. We got endnotes, but you can still keep up with them and check them if you do that work. Other first impressions, it's done by Broadside Publishing, which is an imprint of HarperCollins. I'll talk more about this later, but that just kind of caught me off guard. Don't know a lot about them. It's also cheaply printed a bit. You'll get into the paper. It's pretty cheap paper, which makes sense for someone who's busting on the scene as a newer author. It did become a New York Times bestseller, so maybe we'll get a better printed edition in the future. But that's just something going in. At least it was hardback, and they did do the work on that. There was lots of hype about this and conversation going into it. So I've first heard about this book at the Southern Baptist Convention in the summer of 2024. The book was releasing towards the end of the summer. Wanted to hear about it from Founders Ministries, from some others. Wanted to pick it up. And it promised to be a huge fire, like lots of stuff coming to light. And I'll talk about that more in the video. But really what caught me as I saw the promises of what was coming out is who was endorsing it. There's a lot of credible people that I listened to, looked to, would consider very credible voices endorsing this book and telling people they needed to read it and to process through its contents. And so you have people like John MacArthur, just the back of the book. You have John MacArthur, Ben Shapiro, Vodi Bakum, Rosaria Butterfield, Tom Askell from Founders Ministries, and others talking about this book and its contents and how people needed to read it and really think about how they're leading their church or whose church you're a part of and who you're listening to. And so that's why I wanted to pick it up, and I was excited to do so when it arrived. So let's get into the review section, which is really strengths, weaknesses, and some of the cautionary things that were strengths that I personally liked about the book and enjoyed. Weaknesses, things that I thought could have been improved or just kind of was like about, and then some of the cautions that could go either way, just things that are in the book that you're going to have to deal with as you're reading through it. So first up, the bad, then we'll do the good, then we'll do the ugly / cautionary. So the bad, the negatives, these are some things that I was like, I don't know about these sorts of things. So first, the inflammatory title. So Shepherds for Sale is not really the full label of what's here. Not every shepherd in here is for sale. Megan Basham is really doing a range. So she's really talking through wolves in sheep clothing. So actually the wolves, the cowards, people who for prestige or money or other things just backed down and got in line with leftist agenda things. Mercenaries, literally guns for hire. David French is one of the ones that comes to mind. People who were hired to infiltrate the church, and they got in and were all behind these agendas and could be really bought off and used in different ways. And then she talks about fools, people who listened to the others in these three categories and then followed suit and used their type of language to promote these types of conversations and agendas. And she talks through some good guys, some people who are doing good work, fighting for biblical Christianity, choosing biblical content and pushing things that are from the Bible and from God in their own spaces and places. And so they're talked about, that's from the introduction. And she does talk through even the title a little bit in her Canon Plus interview with Doug Wilson and friends, which I'll link to later and talk about. She talks about the initial title for the book was Evangelicals for Rent. which is kind of not as inflammatory or not as shock value as Shepherds for Sale. And so I kind of wish they had went for that, but it wouldn't have sold as much. It wouldn't probably have become a New York Times bestseller. So I understand why they went with the title, but really, I think it's one of the sad things that people are missing that spectrum. She's talking about wolves, cowards, mercenaries, fools, and some good guys with just Shepherds for Sale, because you think everyone's for sale in its contents. Also, Smaller Fire, I said earlier, promised was like that lots of stuff was going to come to light. Really, if you're paying attention to Christian news media, journalism, what's going on in evangelicalism, a lot of the things in here are not going to surprise you. There's going to be some stories, some connections that surprise you, but really she's going through with as a Christian journalist and connecting the dots. And that's really helpful. But these are things that most of the things were not new to me, but I learned more about certain things, and she's connecting the dots so you see how really big some of these problems and issues are. So it was a little bit smaller fire, but it was a fire all nonetheless. One criticism people had negatively about the book online is that there was a lot about Trump. There was a lot against never Trumpers, and people argued, "Oh, she wrote this, book to promote Trump." I didn't get that vibe. She wrote this book really between 2021 and 2023. Trump's going to be a prominent source because he's the most recent Republican candidate. The overturning of Roe v. Wade. Just because of when she's writing this book, Trump's going to be featured a lot. I don't think he was over-featured. I personally could have seen him featured less, but that's just something that people have pushed as a negative online. The last thing is that there's a declaration of war at the end. Not a war on culture, not a war for our country, but a war with other Christians. And I think we need to be alert to that wolves and others have false teachers come into the church. But it does sound a little bit alarmist in the way Megan Basham goes about it. I understand why, which is why you need to, if you get this book, read the introduction and the conclusion, and then read any of the middle chapters. Those things balance out why she wrote this book and what she was trying to do, and then her personal story and what she sees happening in the future. She wants us to fight for biblical Christianity and to understand what's going on in our churches and to be alert and awake as Christians. And so I think it serves that, but declaring war on other Christians seems a little extreme, but we do need to fight for biblical fidelity when necessary. And she's obviously saying it's necessary in these realms. And I really agree with her on that as well. So the good, the positives. So here are the things I loved about this book, just personally as I was reading through. First, the clear messaging on what this book is and is not. She says in the introduction, it's not a work of political theory, nor is it really a work of theology. She's not going to talk about why homosexuality is a sin versus not, but it's a work of Christian journalism, and she's personally interpreting things and connecting the dots and making some interpretive kind of claims and conclusions and applications throughout the book. And so I think it was a good work in that it clearly knew what it was, and it told us what it was and what it was not from the beginning. She also says that she's not saying the church is in danger of falling. She said, the gates of hell shall not prevail against Christ's church. She's like, that's not what I'm trying to do. And she's not saying every pastor's for sale. She's saying we need to know what the healthy churches are and who the healthy pastors are and follow them and support them. And be a part of local healthy churches led by biblical pastors. She also says one of the positives that I thought about was knowledge of topics. You're going to learn a lot about topics as Christians we should be concerned about in the public square by reading this book. If you pick it up, just look at the table of contents. I'm going to do a longer video looking through those agendas being pushed by the left and the topics covered in this book. So pay attention to my channel, and I'll have that video coming out soon. Also, a positive is she wanted to do an antivirus update, and I think she does that in this book. If you're a Christian, you read this book, you're going to be paying attention for these things, and I hope that you'll be trying to think more biblically about them when you hear language from the left or the left has used to come into the church. We will be more attentive to them and alert as Christians. Last, I think a super positive of this book is the publication process that it went through. Megan Basham shares with Doug Wilson and friends in the Canon Plus Canon Press interview that she did, that this publication from her went through the editorial and the legal process twice. So she was first with Regenery, which is an imprint of Salem books. She went through the editorial work, went through the legal part, and then got handed off to and ended up choosing as the final publisher Broadside Books, an imprint of HarperCollins. She said that was a really positive thing because it actually moved her farther outside of the evangelical Christian camp of publishing a little bit. Even though HarperCollins does some Christian publishing, she was far enough away that she could say these things without putting a huge filter and having people kind of try to infiltrate and derail the project. And so I think this book benefits a lot because she went through the editorial process twice and the legal process for all the citations and stuff twice with the fact checking. So I personally think that's a huge positive for this work. Last, the ugly / the cautionary. These are some things as I was reading along that was just like, I don't know. So just think about these things as you're going through. So one is the subject index. They did an excellent job with the subject index in this book. You can turn to it, find any name, any topic, any person that's talked about. One bad thing about that is you can read that out of context. And so I'll let you explore online and see some of the ways people have done that and some of the arguments in this book. Is like, really, this book, you need the context before you read something. You can't just go to the subject index, find where somebody is mentioned, and go there and get a balanced view of what's going on. You need to know in context whether Megan sees them as a wolf, a mercenary, a coward, a fool, someone who was duped into this, or a good person. And you have to read the context to understand that. And so the subject index can be used rightly to find these claims, but it also can be used poorly to read something out of context. Also, cautionary is the narrative construction. This is just something in our day. Journalists always are trying to build a narrative. And so we have a way as people to pick out the individual stories or things to construct the narrative we want. And so I think Megan Basham, as a Christian sister in Christ, was trying to present things honestly, but she is picking out things that further the narrative and story and things that she has seen over her history of journalism. And so you need to be aware of that going in. One cautionary thing is the woke wastebasket. People who are more fundamentalist, more conservative. That's a word that's going to come up as you read this book and some others, and people doing critiques of this book, is one thing I dislike personally as someone who believes in the fundamentals of the Christian faith, but not in the bad side of fundamentalism. I did a video on that on my channel, Fundamentalism Now versus 100 years ago. You can find that easily by searching. Is that when one person takes a step towards something that sounds leftist or liberal, outside of the box of whatever we define as Christianity, then everything they've done, everything they've ever said, every sermon they've ever preached gets dumped in the woke wastebasket. And I just don't think that's totally helpful. Honestly, I think some people honestly can make statements and they can apologize for them. Megan Basham actually allows, towards the end of this book, room for people who are in some of those categories, mercenaries, cowards, fools, to repent, to honestly say, I'm sorry, to apologize, and to come back to biblical fidelity. And so I think we need to allow that, and we can't say just because someone says a statement, we didn't just throw everything they've ever done, said, and their whole entire life work into the woke wastebasket, call them liberal, leftist. But I do think it needs to be a cause for us to prick up our ears and pay attention to what they see in their manner of life and ministry going forward, to see whether that drift and their movement away from the scriptures, away from biblical Christianity continues, or was it just a misstep and they get back and they move back towards biblical Christianity. So just my personal statement on that. Lastly, cautionary: distraction from ministry and Great Commission work. If you're picking up this work and reading it to get the dirt on people, to figure out, to argue online, to go, like Gavin Ortlund made some comments about this book when it came out, and people were just like berating him online. I just don't think that's helpful in the church at all, for us to berate other Christians in the public sphere, to just doing nasty things to them. And so I think sometimes books like this that expose people, there's a part of us as sinful humanity. We want the dirt, we want the gossip, we want to go after people, we want the recent arguments, and it can distract us from doing real great gospel, Great Commission work, proclaiming the gospel, doing evangelism, serving the least of these, serving others in our community, and doing gospel and Great Commission work. These types of books and issues, if you're trying to feed off of the drama, can really be a distraction, and that's not the reason to pick up this book. If you're going to pick up this book to be more faithful in your Bible reading and in your church and in your personal life, that's why you should pick up this book, to be a force for good, to actually follow God and lead others towards him. So, bottom line, I mentioned this earlier, I'm going to unpack it here just briefly. This book is a book many Christians should get and read, especially Southern Baptists. Southern Baptist leaders are mentioned a lot in here, and many in a negative light, but there's a lot of good Southern Baptist leaders. I'm part of the Southern Baptist Convention. I think it's things we should be aware of and conscious of going forward. I also think many Christians across the broader spectrum of evangelicalism, churches in church pews across America, will benefit from reading this book if they pick it up and do so. But their motivation for doing so, like I already mentioned earlier, should not be to cause more drama, to attack people online, but to be more faithful biblical Christians and to be part of their churches and to make their churches into biblically faithful churches. So the right motives to read this book is they should have an eagerness, anyone picking up this book, to be faithful to God in their personal life first and then in their church life, regardless of the responsibility they have as a church leader or just a member sitting in the pew. That should be the reason to pick this up. I want my antivirus updated, and I want to be a better, faithful Christian in my life and in the life of my local church. So, last part of this video, resources that helped me know more about this book and its contents. I'll link these in the description of this video. Here's a brief overview of just some things that I found helpful forming the conversation around this book as I was reading it. Founders Ministry has a good The Sword and the Trowel interview with Megan Basham. Allie Beth Stuckey did a good interview with Megan Basham as well. Eric Metaxas did 2 podcasts on the Eric Metaxas show. Gavin Ortlund, who had some dust-ups, stir-ups with Megan Basham. He heard he was in the book. He got it, went to the subject index, went to his chapter. And he was featured like 5 or 6 pages in the climate change chapter and really had issues with the way he was presented. So get the book, read it, do some of the research on your own. But he does Megan Basham's Shepherds for Sale, problems with the book. There's the link. Then you have Climate Change, Why Christians Should Engage. This is the video she cites in that chapter. Go watch the video in its entirety. So if you're going to investigate this issue, buy the book, Megan Basham's book. Start at the introduction. Read the introduction and then the climate change chapter all the way through. Then go watch Gavin Ortlund's video on climate change that she put in the book, and then make the decision for yourself. Does she mischaracterize him or not? And I know she's building a narrative, but you can make the decision on your own. So then he has responding to Megan Basham's latest claims. Some of the things people were doing to him online after this is just ridiculous as Christians, honestly. And then fundamentalism in the church today. He has a decent video, a good video on this topic. I have a good video on this topic on fundamentalism 100 years ago versus now, some of the changes we have. And he talks about in that video 1 positive of fundamentalism and then 3 cautions or negatives of fundamentalism today from his stance. And then Canon Press, this was a really great interview, is Shepherds for Sale, an interview with Doug Wilson and friends with Megan Basham. So I'll link all of that below in the description. So What are your thoughts? I would love to hear your thoughts in the bottom, in the discussion underneath this video. So leave a comment. Honestly, please be charitable in your comments. I want to learn more from the comments that are left and to help clarify any questions or things that you might further have after watching this video for me about this book and its content. So I want to plug some other content around this book that I'll be publishing and putting out real soon. I already have a video out on why Megan Basham wrote this book, an overview of the introduction and conclusion of Shepherds for Sale. So you can get that video right now. I'll link to it with a card in the top, as well as in the description for this video. I have an upcoming video coming out on the agendas of the left covered in Shepherds for Sale. I'm going to be doing chapter summaries and very brief and the way forward, kind of what Megan talks about in this book and some of the ways I would encourage you to think and process if you're reading this book once you're done, and that as well. And then I'm going to link to all of those and put up some of this brief kind of outline content on a blog post as well that'll be linked in the description once it posts. So until next time, continue to read, treasure, follow the word. God bless, and I'll see you guys soon.